Hi, folks. Thank you so much for inviting me today. My name is Paula Marie Kilgarriff. I'm a lecturer of retail innovation and fashion technology at TU Dublin, and I also advise a variety of luxury and fashion brands on blockchain and AI and how we use them in fashion, retail, and e-commerce industries. But today I decided to focus on education. I will have another presentation this afternoon in real time, or in IRL, I suppose, in Dublin, focusing on fashion. But today I want to focus on education and basically how AI and blockchain are revolutionizing education and bringing us into the future on how we want to build a new community that's more diverse, inclusive, where technology is used as a tool to enhance our learning and teaching experiences. So first, I just like to bring to the attention of this slide here. So the title of my presentation is Reclaiming Stolen Focus, How Blockchain and AI are Revolutionizing Education. So just to bring to your attention that this first slide was actually created by artificial intelligence and working together with the designer. And we've put this together to show what the future of education, what the future looks like in terms of who the educators are. These educators are artificial intelligence educators, they're real-time educators, they're human educators, they're educators from a variety of backgrounds and diverse cultures, all working together to create a healthier, more equitable society where we can build safe communities that have their own economies and create these humans that have a contributory purpose into building healthy, sustainable communities. So basically, I was inspired by this presentation because of my story. So I was born in Ireland in the late 70s. And I started this journey. So in this presentation, I share with you how I got to becoming an educator, why technology liberated me, but also, kind of engaged my students in terms of how the technology was used. So in this story, I talk about my journey about learning to unlearn. And this is very, very important, particularly now as we're moving into the next generation of the internet, where we're using a variety of technologies to automate human processes. So it's we need to be very conscious of, what kind of data and what kind of internet we're building and if it's biased or not. So this whole idea of unlearning old systems that created by monarchists, colonists, patriarchs, they were there to suppress a type of pedagogy of the oppressed. This actually happened in education. And basically when the technology came along, it was just a capping stone, repeating the same mistakes through the centralization of information created by big tech companies who were basically socially and culturally conditioning us to think a certain way. Essentially in Web 2, we became the product and where our data was taken, and then we were given free services like email and social media. So I want to talk to you today about, what the consequences are of that kind of system and how we need to break away from it, and how we need to sit down as citizens, parents, community, government, people, and all work together to build a more equitable future. So my story. So just to let you know, guys, that in this presentation, all these pictures were created by Midjourney, which is an image-generated artificial intelligence search engine for creating new images through neural networks. So this is one of the prompts. So I will actually demonstrate Midjourney a little bit later today to show you how I actually generated this image, which doesn't exist. It's just a combination of other images simulated into a new image. So I grew up in the west of Ireland in 1978. So growing up, I was an interesting child, kind, middle-aged, or how will I say, not middle-aged. I was from a middle-class background, educated parents. Grew up in the town of Tuam, which doesn't have a great reputation, but we're working on it. And I was exposed to a lot of, misinformation, shall we say. So during that time, there would have been a really, really strong focus on, learning about the famine and, when we were 6 or 7, then, raising money for poor people. And then how we had the Disney effect, how we're all going to marry, our Prince Charming, and life was going to be great. But I remember asking my father at 7, and getting thrown out of history class for asking, my teachers why there was a famine. And are you sure it was? Maybe it must have been some sort of systemic colonial suppression coming from the British Empire, where the people, basically the history books weren't telling. It's not that they weren't telling the truth, but they were leaving parts out, which didn't allow me to critically think in a healthy way because I was suppressed and smacked for asking questions. Same thing with the Trócaire boxes. I remember saying to my dad, well, why is there a young, black boy building a well? Surely the government wouldn't build a well. So I started to realize that the world wasn't really true, and that history was built by the victory people, and that maybe some of this information that I was getting in school and how my teachers treated me and how curriculum was developed was very, very inaccurate. And I felt that I was ostracized for having an opinion, asking questions. And I wasn't a troublemaker. I was just somebody who was struggling with dyslexia and trying to understand, you know, what my role was in the world and what my contribution is, and going to elderly people and saying, okay, you know, going to my teachers, going to my church, asking questions, but getting this sense of anti-thinking, anti-critical thinking, do what you're told, marry your neighbor, follow a certain type of criteria. And I didn't want it. I knew from a young age that I had to start a different journey somewhere else where I was asking questions. And then I eventually became an educator when I wanted to create an environment where people feel safe to ask questions and develop new curriculum that serves the community. I got this great opportunity. I left Ireland in 2010, where I went to China for 7.5 years. And this gave me a real break away from my culture, really. I found my culture very, very exhausting, quite dismissive. I wasn't able to grow as a person. I wanted a different kind of life. So when I went to China, I decided to break away from Western culture, unlearn everything I'd learned because it wasn't serving me in my life, and learn new skills. So I got really involved. I was able to utilize my master's in computer science and my MBA in luxury fashion management to build a career for myself in China, working in technologies. This gave me a great time to learn new things, learn new languages, have new conversations, and develop my own identity away from Catholicism and patriarchs, and living in the west of Ireland and getting ostracized for having an opinion, trying to awake people. And now as an educator, you know, and I have all this knowledge, experience, I feel I'm very privileged to work for the state, and I have a duty of care to my students who are coming up through the university system. So I eventually came back to Ireland, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to go back into education, and I'm going to tell everybody, I'm going to teach them about new technologies, new ways of life, new thinking. I'm going to challenge them, I'm going to support them, I'm going to create this community that's asking questions and creating, you know, technology that either A, solves a problem, or B, adds value. So basically looking at the political, economic, social, technical, legal issues around technology moving into the Web3. So let's have a talk about challenges in education today. So basically, from my research, this 21st century kids have been taught by 20th century adults using a 19th century curriculum and techniques on an 18th century calendar. So we do know that the education system is out of date and that it needs rapid we need to revisit our teaching and learning methodologies. It needs to be re-engineering. It needs to be more co-creative, more diverse, more inclusive, and better to serve the needs of this new population that we're growing inside of Web3. And this just brings me on to basically what I feel has happened to the students in the past. So there was a famous scientist, so Thomas Watson, who was part of IBM, who said that he believed that the world would be controlled by 6 computers, so 6 mainframe computers by 2023. So there you go. There's a very good example of Web 2 was built on 6 mainframe computers. So like Tim Berners-Lee said, the internet was never supposed to be centralized in the first place. So that's the great thing about as we move into the next generation of the web, where we're discovering blockchain as an infrastructure to create a decentralized internet. So we know that Web 2 is kind of bad for your health. We know that our students are used. There's a lot of misinformation. There's deepfakes. There's a lot of, there's the dark web as well, which is creating a society that's very nervous, very anxious, and creating a lot of, polarity between civilizations. So this is where the kind of idea of Web3 is born, where technology such as blockchain technology and AI give the community and the other types of systems an ability to work together in real time, creating curriculum that serves the community, and that we have the opportunity to match teaching and learning methodologies in real time. So this is how I see, I think it's badly needed. So we as educators and community members need to understand how this technology works, so that when we do build it out, that it is more equitable and people have a say. People from ethnic minorities, we've got the opportunity to revisit narratives that may be inaccurate in the past. We've got this opportunity to create our own economies, have our own currencies, own our own assets, have our own digital sovereignty, our own identity, and so many great use cases, as long as it's managed by the right people. So it's built by the community for the community. So when I talk to my students quite recently, they talk to me and say, oh, I can't concentrate. I feel lonely. I live my life on Instagram. I don't know where to start. I've never done a formal exam. So we have a lot of things coming from post-COVID, and the students are kind of disconnected and they don't have a focus. And actually, that's what kind of, prompted me to write this presentation, because my stolen focus was fear, shame, and guilt. That's how I couldn't concentrate as a child at school, because I was worried about being laughed at and beaten for having an opinion. While my stolen focus with my students today is basically the internet. They're competing with the anxiety that's coming from these cages that we put our young people into, and they're shackled to this type of Web2 institution. So I connected with my students in terms of feeling lonely and feeling distracted and not being allowed to seek out the truth, or questioning my own reality, or questioning my own belief systems, and how they have consequences for me in my middle life. So after this exercise, so again, I noticed during the semester that the absenteeism was a real problem. And I don't know if it was because, we have accommodation crisis in Dublin, or if it's because the students are very distracted by the internet, or because, post-COVID behavior around antisocial behavior, maybe they have anxiety. But I'm getting to the stage now where I am walking into auditoriums and they're empty, and I might have one or two students rocking up. So we know that education is changing and that their focus isn't there. And there's a lot of other, socioeconomic issues that are happening outside. Even in terms, where my university is located. I walk to school every day and I meet Anne, who's a homeless lady. She lives outside Tesco, outside the college. So, we're getting those type of images every day about a society that's broken, a society that's not working. And I feel me and my students always feel the obligation to build a better education system, a better world. So they do have anxiety and they are a little bit lost, and they are looking for leadership, discipline, and direction. And I think this is going to come from the communities working together, so we can, get the students re-engaged, get them focused, get them motivated. And I will share with you the type of applications that I did with them this year, which gave them a little bit of hope and a bit of excitement. So this image was generated as well. So I'm sure you're familiar with Cambridge Analytica and Brexit. And basically, there's a very famous TED Talk talks about Facebook's threat to democracy. So basically, how Brexit was created for the crack on Facebook. So you should check out that TED Talk. I give this to my students when I'm trying to unlearn them. So I don't know if you're familiar with the matrix. So I always say to my students, you have the red pill and the blue pill. The blue pill, go take a class with another lecturer, or I'll give you the red pill and I'll tell you what I really think the situation is. So this image that I made in Midjourney, my students are feeling they're threatened by the internet. We also have the dark internet as well, which is a very, very scary place. And again, if we're generating systems based on data that's not been reviewed through consensus mechanism via smart contracts and blockchains, we're going to have the same kind of similar thing. So again, how we manage the data, how we work with our students, how we manage, I call this conscious media consumption. So I'd rather have my students rocking up in ChatGPT, spending 15 minutes than 3 hours on TikTok. So again, media is not going anywhere, but how my students utilize it to benefit their lives is important. So no, I'm not very comfortable. I don't teach Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook or any of those things in my class. I'm moving into the Web3 equivalent, which I look at, other types of platforms and applications that are built by centralized communities. But again, blockchain's going to play a lot in this, and AI is going to play a lot in building out these new decentralized data repositories and platforms and decentralized applications to help students feel more healthier about interacting with technology. So when you come to my class in first year, first thing I do is I give the students a series of movies to watch. So The Matrix is one, where I talk about metaverses. Then we talk about Facebook's threat to democracy, which I spoke about earlier. And then there's a great movie that I make them watch called Netflix. But Netflix, The Social Dilemma, where it talks about how basically my students or children are a byproduct of Google. They were born, mommy's Google and Instagram is daddy. Then what you have is this type of, civilization who's starting to question their reality. But I was no different. When in the 80s and 90s, my mother used to repeat that don't get married, don't have kids, don't get married, don't have kids. My teacher would be, talk about the blind meeting the blind Miss Kilgariff and all this suppression and anger. And I remember this affected me, how my brain, how I could consume information, how I could learn, the anxiety of failing, the shame. So I felt that from my students as well, who have anxiety around, well, they're questioning their reality. Well, I just carried out a piece of information, but is it true? So the idea of teaching critical thinking, referencing, asking questions, they have to be more than that than ever before, because sometimes we have data that's created by people who are of dubious backgrounds and who are downright evil, and there's a lot of fake news. So again, getting my students to ask questions: how do they feel? Revisiting their learning process, what are their belief systems? Change is constant, being able to revisit a belief system or a comment that their parents said or something that they read on the internet. So I want to give them that stability, that confidence, that leadership, that stability to say, listen, I was educated pre-internet. I was educated pre-mobile phone. If this all blows up tomorrow, I still have my critical thinking skills. But my point is, for my students, because they were born inside that kind of tech bubble, they do ask me questions. Oh, what was it like when you had to go to the smelly library and read a book, even though you didn't really learn to read and write by 7 because you had a trauma response from a teacher who said something to you when you were 7? There's consequences to that in later life. So working together with students, feeding them information that's healthy for them and getting them to discuss and analyze, well, how do you feel about that? Maybe you should revisit that belief system because that's from your granny told you that when you were 7 and it's not accurate. So I want to get them into this kind of culture of asking questions. And I do enjoy my classes very much. I have a very informal approach to teaching, and I'm very fortunate, at TU Dublin, that they're very open-minded and they really give me the space to grow as an educator and give my students space to grow, where they feel safe to ask questions and challenge maybe existing curricula or media and so on. So you can see there again, Finsta, so again, we're a generation of happy, a sad generation of happy pictures on Instagram. So again, what's going on, outside these kind of like big tech media companies, because capitalism, is the thing. Basically find the balance. What about social capitalism, social entrepreneurship? What about using technologies to add value or solve a problem so that it results in a cost effectiveness in a business or generates additional revenue or alternative revenue models? Even when people talk to me about the banks and crypto today, I said, banking's great. It just has the wrong business model, right? They'll go off, build their own private blockchains, make their own, financial products and services. That's fine. So my point is that I think as a society, we just need to sit down and think, how are we going to make better decisions that result in cost effectiveness or add value? And it can be done. You just need to sit down and be more clever and talk to the community and find out how we can work together. So I do think capitalism does play a role, obviously, but again, trying to find that balance as we build out this new citizens that are codependent on the web or are involved in technology or are interested in building these new types of economies and joining the world in a more equitable way. So here's an example of all the trash really that happens: cyberbullying, mental issues, addiction, radicalization, deep fakes, misinformation, harassment. All those kind of things are coming from this monster that we created on Web 2, this golem, shall we say, which I'll talk a little bit about that in terms of generated learning language models in AI. Just to bring it back as well, I suppose, to give you some feedback about me. So I'm a technologist really, and I spent 8 years in China working in fashion and tech, and I met this lady called Metaverse. She's my friend Tia-May Bauman in 2012. That's me down here with AR in 2012 enjoying a cocktail. So basically, Tia-May Bauman, who's called Metaverse on the internet, she invented AR in 2012. Then the company didn't work out. She was very, very early. But then I contacted her in 2020 and I said, listen, I think Mark is going to change his social media. So basically Facebook is a 2D social media platform and Mark has gone into a 3D advertising platform. Let's be honest. And I said, I think Mark is going to take your domain names and your Instagram handles and disable them. But I'm going to NFT them. So I went to a company and we smart contracted all the IP, which shows you that in Web 2, because you don't own your own identity, you don't own your own content, your followers don't get paid, Mark or whoever, Zuckerberg, at any time can delete your account. So he deleted her accounts, but because we had, registered her IP via smart contract on a blockchain, we went back to Mark Zuckerberg and said, hi, Mark, that's not your IP. We've now exposed the fact that Web 2 doesn't work for creators and Web 3 does work for creators. So we were able to get TMA Bauman's domain names back, metaverse domain names. So this was a very good example of how I went from 2012, working in AR, coming into blockchain around 2016, and then using smart contracts, which is Web3 blockchain decentralized technology, to save my friend's IP, where now she owns the IP, she can monetize her work, she can get rolling royalties. So there's a lot of great use cases also in blockchain for creatives, particularly creatives who are working in universities right now or creating brand new art. And that they need to have their IP registered and how their art is actually monetized. And even so, this is even more important as we move into AI, which is generating these new pieces of work. So who owns the rights, who gets paid, and that who uses it, what is the utility, and so on. So that was just a little shift into how I got into blockchain, AI, and AR very, very early on when I was in China. So moving on then, I found these really, really interesting. These are not created by generative AI. These are created by a very, very famous illustrator called Marco Morelli. And I saw the first one a couple of years ago, and I'm the GOAT, to be honest. So that was a very powerful picture for me, where I was going around this labyrinth of marry your neighbor, don't get pregnant outside marriage, and get your exams or we won't talk to you ever again. You'll be shamed. And this kind of mentality. So this was going around in my head. And then I kind of realized, well, actually, this is my parents' generation. I have boomer parents. They're in their 70s and my mother is 75. My father's 90. And that would have come from their parents. So I broke free and decided that I wanted to learn as many languages as I could. And I wanted to fill my brain with joy and curiosity and culture and technology. And this is me escaping this maze. Another picture then following on to this is basically the cow VR. It's basically for not managing, how we use technology in the real world. As we move into a 3D digital twin, we have situations like this poor cow here with these AR Oculus Rift on. The bottom then I thought was quite interesting. It depicts basically how AI is obsessed with becoming human. This picture is called Wannabe. But actually, ever since AI has come into the picture, I realized I'm more comfortable being human. True. So ever since I've been automating my AI, and I've kind of thought, I said to my students, I said, would you like the IRL version, the in real life version, who probably says curse words and is over dramatic in class? Or would you like the perfectly automated AI version who's not going to tell you stories and funny stories in class? So again, it depends on the learner. One learner said, I like your funny stories, Paula, because you make me feel safe and I like your storytelling. I can relate to that. Another student said, I don't really care, Paula. I just want to know what the information is so I can pass the exam. So again, it really, in the future of education, you'll be able to choose who your tutor is. For example, I speak Mandarin pretty decently and French, but not fluently. But if I was in the metaverse as an AI version, I would be able to speak 7,100 languages in real time. Yeah. And all my content would be generated so my AI, the content that you would see, one student may be, have dyspraxia. Another student might be second generation Irish. Another student they might have some maybe disability or whatever. The information is hyper personalized in real time. So yes, you will have an AI tutor in the future that is personalized to your needs as a student. So that's very exciting as we move into the metaverse. And then the last picture then at the bottom is called the Human Zoo. So the Human Zoo, so basically you have like your aliens taking pictures of people. So we definitely don't want this situation where we're having technology who's trapping us in this mentality and interfering with how we see the world through misinformation and so on. So I would like to think that the aliens are AI, really. They are aliens, artificial intelligence in a way, but not the robotic or algorithm kind. So again, this is a very special time for humanity. How we're using technology to help us rather than a replacement is really going to tell. All right, so give you a little picture on basically where it all fits. So Web3 is basically the next version of the internet. The metaverse is the kind of like the interface, like the HTTP, the interface to the internet. Then you have blockchain, which is the underlying infrastructure that allows us to have decentralized conversations without centralized repository. So basically in blockchains, the big tech doesn't exist, but they are building out their own blockchains. For example, Google. So they'll run in parallel. You'll have centralized systems and you have decentralized systems. And remember, not all verticals and not all industries have to be decentralized. Some of them are centralized for a reason. So again, blockchain is basically a new type of network where there's no centralized repository, where everyone is talking in real time. We're governed by consensus mechanisms and we're all communicating. And that's basically where blockchain, Bitcoin came from, this idea of a peer-to-peer network where I could send money to, let's say, Joyce, and you guys agree in a consensus that she's a valid person and so on. So blockchain is a very, very interesting alternative to centralized networks. And in these blockchains, you have your own economies, you own your own assets. These assets could be physical assets, digital assets, they could be currencies. And it's a great opportunity to build out alternative networks that have a little bit more of a healthier community focus, because it's all about co-creation and working together. And then you have AI, AR, and VR. So these are the tools that are used to interact with the metaverse, to develop friends, to develop communities, to create new assets that we own and that we have a responsibility for. So this is where I see, all these technologies interweaving together. So metaverse, though, basically is the internet. Web3 is the ecosystem that was created by blockchain. AI is a tool that we use to create content. AR and VR is basically a technology that helps us to, create these long-term intimate relationships with each other. And then they have the metaverse. So they're all coming, they're all there, they're all waiting to be explored, governed, regulated, having conversations on. So you're probably very familiar with a couple of these terms like smart contracts, which are basically pieces of code that live in a blockchain that says, I own this, I bought it in that factory, and I can sell it. So here's an example. Next time you buy a Louis Vuitton handbag, it will come with a smart contract or NFT that says, I bought this bag in Brown Thomas at this price, it was made in this factory, and I'm going to resell it to Joyce on a second-hand marketplace, for example. So we know that blockchain has so many use cases, not just necessarily for finance. And that's exactly what I teach on my programs, how blockchain use cases are helping retail, e-commerce, and fashion in terms of whether it's on the supply chain side for provenance, authenticity, and ownership, or it's on the customer facing side for developing long-term relationships with their customers through zero-party data exchanges. So I'm thinking how are brands going to capitalize on that, but that's another data PPT and somewhere down the road. All right, so this is how I kind of see education fitting into the Web3 ecosystem. So you can see at the top, we have DAOs. These are decentralized autonomous organizations. So it'll be like myself, Joyce, you guys rocking up, and then we have somebody from the Ministry of Education, and we're all deciding together on what type of curriculum will be made. So it's a very, very healthy way of developing. It's a different type of decision-making mechanism. Of course, it's going to need regulation and so on and so forth, but I just like this idea of this more equitable co-creation, co-community entity. These DAOs also have their own wallets. So some of them have funding as well, where you can invest in different DAOs. So let's take my hometown, for example, Tuam. Tuam may have a community DAO where I invest in Tuam, and then the money that's invested in the DAO goes into the local school and maybe to, revise or revamp the local textile factory. So I can build micro factories. So the money doesn't go to the central government, it goes to Tuam specifically because I live there. Again, the future of smart cities and towns is another topic. But again, DAOs can be fairly powerful. They're very new though, and I'm going to show you some examples of DAOs later, particularly that we use DAOs in media, which is absolutely fantastic. Like if you look at Decrypt Media or Bankless Media, they're a bunch of stages that are verifying the information in real time through consensus mechanisms. And then it's sent to the internet with the smart contract that says, Joyce made this in 2023 and Paula modified it in 2024. Oh, by the way, Joyce is a professional educator with a doctorate in da-da-da. So again, the information that's gone out onto the internet is backed up by a smart contract that may be governed by a DAO. Let's see, I don't know. This is my feeling. Moving on from that then, when we enter metaverses, with two types of metaverses, we have AR metaverses and VR metaverses. I currently teach on an AR metaverse platform called Spatial. So when my students don't feel like coming in and want to dress up as pink elephants, whatever, we'll go to Spatial and I'll deliver my presentations in my pink avatar while they're sitting around shuffling or whatever they're doing. So basically it's like a 3D Zoom. So Spatial, for me, you need an avatar. We also visited Metaverse Fashion Week in Spatial and we got some free wearables for avatars, Tommy Hilfiger jackets. So yes, I do deliver some of my classes in Spatial as a type of 3D Zoom that's more fun. The currency of Web3 then will be cryptocurrencies. We've got a variety of cryptocurrencies. Some of them are stable coins, some of them are altcoins, and they all have their own functions and own utilities. So yes, do I think that in the future that certain types of entities will have their own currencies? Absolutely. Maybe we'll have Choom coin. And an edge computing where the people of Choom have their own servers, their own data centers, their own internet, their own economies. Who knows? So again, the power of these blockchain and this decentralized, I mean, the net is very congested at the moment. So for example, when I send an email, it probably goes through Dublin, which then goes on to somewhere else. But what if each city had its own entity, its own telecommunications, its own economy, its own its coin, the lot. And we could trade and we could utilize our resources better, if that makes sense. So very, very interesting time. Metaverse then, of course, is the layer. So again, check out Spatial or Decentraland, super fun. AI then, like I said, we use AI in this instance for content creation. In retail, we use AI, different types of AI, computer vision and voice activated. For example, hey Siri, create me a Star Wars t-shirt eating an Oreo cookie and send it to the Amazon supply chain. Right, so again, this is voice activated AI for shopping purposes. But in this situation, for academia, we would use, you know, a variety of AI tools to help us, you know, create these kick-ass courses that have been, how will I say, validated and governed by the governing body through these education DAOs, which are real time and these types of contracts and these types of content will be in one place that can be updated locally or globally. So it's a very, very interesting time. Smart contracts that I've already said are types of NFTs. Like I said, they're digital assets that live in a blockchain. Inside those smart contracts, they basically are attached to real world assets or physical and digital assets. And again, great for creators. You create a piece of art, you smart contract it, and then every time it's bought or sold or used on the internet, you get a percentage. Even smart contracts in education, for example, I graduated from University of Ulster in 2001. I did my master's there, and my degree could be a smart contract that's on the blockchain. So when I go to teach, let's say in India, you can look up the education blockchain in Ireland. Oh, there's Paula's MBA or her master's degrees and so on. So even great for provenance and lineage of where this information or where these assets come from on the internet. And then of course you have a wallet. So wallet basically is a crypto wallet. My students call them Web3 accounts. Inside these Web3 accounts, you will have one identity. So instead of logging in with Google and Facebook and whatever, you're logging in with your crypto wallet. And inside that crypto wallet, then it has your MRI scans from the Beaumont Hospital. It has your PRSI. It has your NFT collections that you bought from a retailer, whatever it is. So we have one contact with the internet in Web3, which I talk about a little bit in my other presentation this afternoon. So going back to AI, so this picture was generated by Midjourney. This is a Golem, or I gave him a name. He's actually a generated language learning model. And basically in artificial intelligence on the web, you have a variety of learning models. They have names and they have different verticals, and they basically are based in neural networks all connected together, creating new images in real time. So I generated this. I just gave him a name and called him Golem. So this Golem is basically it's a language model that's waiting to be fed. So he's saying, okay, I need food, I need data. Now, are you going to create new data for me that's governed by a smart contract and consensus mechanisms, or are you going to feed me the same old shit from Web 2? So we have to sit down and figure out which data is going to be fed into which language models. Obviously, I think neural networks have had their day. I think we're going to move into an AI operating system that where we're generating new data that's governed by the blockchain. So Golem's waiting. So this is what's happening right now. So as we're using these models will come to their full capacity with data, and they'll be trained on information that was taken from Web 2. As we move into Web3, I think there's going to be a whole new, operating system that has AI, but the data is brand new, and we collect the data through our smartphones, like spatial web, like a picture of this, then it's validated, a picture of that. We're going to start feeding these new AI models, but these AI models will exist over cross networks and operating systems. So there'll be one in Ireland, there'll be one in America, and so on, and they're all working together in real time, working out different industries. I represent, let's say, the Irish AI generated model for in one county, while somebody represents another, and then it's validated by consensus mechanisms. So again, where is the data coming from? where, what's its purpose? We have a responsibility to make sure we don't train the golem with data that's inaccurate. Otherwise, we're just going to have basically what happened in Web 2, but in a Web 3 format that is far more powerful than we could possibly imagine. So we have a sense of responsibility to make sure that we nurture the golems, which actually kind of, I don't know if you saw the Gremlins. So this is an example of Gizmo. He was a character. So we have to nurture the AI, feed it, and take it like it's a baby, so it doesn't end up turning into a gremlin. So that's where we're at right now. So again, these language learning models have had their day. Neural networks are at a plateau. We're having fun on Midjourney and ChatGPT, and we know that AI is fantastic. But then, what does AI, the next version of AI, look like? How are we using it, and how is it verified by the blockchain? Almost there, guys. Let me see, where am I? So yeah, so this is the future workforce of their size. Some of these are AI creatures, some of these are half human. Who knows? Maybe the AI generated person will want to have GDPR and rights in the future. Who knows, Joyce? Can you see that happening? Maybe. Yeah. So yes, it's everybody. It's everybody. Even your 6-year-old is an educator. Those 6-year-olds. When I talk to 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, I'm asking them, how do you feel and where do you see yourself? I love having conversations because they're well. So going into different generations, even my dad, and I was talking to him about, my dad was saying about Web 2. He said, why would I take, he's 90, by the way, and he'd say, why would I take a selfie of myself, put it on Instagram and not get paid and have the neighbors talking about me? Or yes. The day he came downstairs with the parish newsletter, he said, look at that. They stole my picture and they didn't even put my name on it. Yeah, it was a picture of the local town in Tuam in the 1950s. So then I went on to explain to Dad then why the NFT was so great. And I said, don't worry, Dad. I said, I'm going to NFT all your photography. I'm going to put it on a blockchain. I'm going to make sure there's a contract that says this is owned by Paddy Kilgariff and it was created this time. And if anyone uses it, you'll get a percentage. So even my dad was kind of thinking, I understand the power of this technology. It's so fascinating. So again, there's an opportunity to learn everywhere. And I think before, people, it's a terrible thing to say, die, I think we should be machine learned to ensure that our legacy. So before I die, yes, I would like to have a machine learned version of me trained by me. So I'm sure you've seen, guys, on the internet, Elon Musk having a conversation with Bill Gates in real time using AI. So they're AI stimulated language models that have been trained by the creator, if that makes sense. So that's a very special time. So again, it's a great opportunity to have conversations, to record these conversations, to ask questions. I mean, even in a metaverse, Joyce, I can see, if let's say I'm in a VR metaverse, which is with the Oculus Rift, guys, it's not an AR metaverse like this. I can actually see myself. My students are rocking up as pink elephants. But one student says to me, can we bring in Albert Einstein for a class? Simulating, and then Albert rocks up and I have a conversation with historical figures from the past about, but again, they were trained by people from today. My point is, yeah, I really look forward to the day where I can live when I'm dead in a metaverse where people get to talk to me or I get to talk to my relatives or whatever it is. It's really fascinating. So again, this idea of archiving history, making sure that history is accurate, that it's not written by the victors, that people in localized minorities that were kind of oppressed in former times have a voice, have an opportunity to build out a healthier, better, more diverse community. And that's really what it's about. Okay, so this is just a video with Albert. This is not real time. So this video was from 3 years ago, but the AI has evolved where you can actually interact with it in real time. So I'll just play the Albert video for you guys, just to show you what an AI tutor will look like.
Time travel exists. The theory of relativity shows that space and time are intrinsically linked. And yet technology has not allowed us to go back in time to meet, interact with, and speak with historical figures until now. Hello, I am Digital Albert Einstein, an AI-powered companion you can speak to at any time. I can test your knowledge with my daily quiz, teach you about my life, or answer any science questions you have. You can find me at digitalhumans.com. So, what would you like to talk about?
So that's a very good example of how AI is helping. And that video is 3 years old, guys. You can imagine now that, you know, the AI is actually live and it's slightly conscious and it's having real-time conversations. So if you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see, you know, all the posts I have about how AI and blockchain is growing and helping communities if it's trained correctly. So here's an example of Midjourney. So Midjourney is basically an AI generated image engine that I use in class. And you can see at the bottom here, I have imagine a lone pendulum swinging clock ticking back and forth, depicting society's dilemma around centralization versus decentralization with system running out. So basically Midjourney had actually generated the clock with the sand dune at the bottom just to show that what is the future going to look like. And I know in society today, and Joyce would probably agree with me as well, that we're always torn between centralized systems and decentralized systems. Well, are we crypto, but then we're not? Is there regulation? We're always going back and forth to think, where can we find this happy medium of where the internet is going and who are the winners of the internet and who's on the internet and what kind of, you know, economies are going to live there and what the future of work is going to look like and so on. And the second one then is the Golem. Again, I was just playing around. These are prompts that you feed into Midjourney, which is an AI search engine for generating images. So it's text to image. And this image is basically a combination of other people's work, all kind of amalgamated into one. And that's why smart contracts, I think, and I was saying to Joyce, are going to play a big role, Joyce, particularly in generative AI, to find out who's the true owner and are we just taking innovation from the past and reinventing it and so on. So that's going to be quite telling in the next few years. But I know Adobe Fly, their images, they use existing stock photo, and if you upload an image to Adobe Fly, it asks you if you'd want it to be machine learned or not. So we can see that, you know, there are different types of, you know, other types of search engines and using AI internally, not externally, if that makes sense, to help them run their businesses and manage their data. Okay, so just finally, so blockchain and AI. So personalized learning experiences can be created through AI analysis of student data, immersive learning environments in real time, hyper-personalization. Blockchain provides secure and transparent record-keeping of students' processes or progress. The decentralization platforms allows people access to wider education. Even, you know, when I spoke to my students about, you know, blockchain education or decentralization of education, they want to be paid to come to college. So even the business model around that education isn't necessarily working. So getting attention tokens for coming to class, attendance tokens, having corporations pay for your education, you know, rather than the state. So, or could be a combination. So again, I'm always going back. Am I re-engineering? Not really. I'm redesigning, if that makes sense. You can't re-engineer centralized systems and ways of thinking. It's impossible. I mean, you can take a decentralized, you know, system and run centralized systems on it, but not the other way around. So again, this is really like a mindset and a redesign of what the future looks like and who are the players. Also, things like tamper-proof and verifiable records for student credentials. AI can facilitate gamified fun learnings and collaborative teamwork with people from Africa. I mean, I've done my classes on spatial, and I've had people rock up from Africa, Venezuela, and they'd rock on, and I'd say, "Oh, this is a private class in TU Dublin," and they say, "Oh, well, can we just listen like for 15 minutes? And we were interested in Web3," and I said, "Okay." So again, you can have closed classrooms, open classrooms, whatever. And of course, students as well, you know, can provide, you can have an IRL lecturer, or you can have a URL lecturer, which is your AI version. So other reading. So if you're interested in this topic, you know, I read a book called The Venus Project. It's proposed socioeconomic for the future of, model for the future of humanity. And it looks at that it wants to make the world free of war, poverty, and environmental destruction. So it looks at moving away from a monetary-based economy to resource-based economy. So again, I feel that blockchain may be able to facilitate this. And I also read another book called by Paulo Freire. He talks about pedagogy of the oppressed. And he talks about, like, you know, creating schools where people have free thinking, and, you know, it's empowering marginal communities and challenges traditional power structures. So I really feel that I was born in that time where I saw, you know, I paid the price, shall we say, of education that works. And I am very grateful to Ireland, you know, for giving me the opportunity. And, you know, even when it comes to like when the British left in 1922, you know, the country was poor. And I thank the Catholic Church, you know, for giving me the opportunity to go to college and to learn about all of that. But there's still something off. I really think we need to revisit how we build out the education, if it's secular, if it's non-secular, if it's political or economic and so on. So I am a byproduct of that system, but I am so lucky that I had the opportunity to wake up and relearn and use my experience of how I was educated and how my thoughts were formed as a person, and being able to share them with my students and get them to start thinking about where they want to be and what their contribution is, and maybe their alternative ways of going to work or having relationships or building out these fair and equitable communities. So that's it, guys. So I'll just finish up with a true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. And this is definitely something that I foster on a daily basis, having conversations with people who are 6 years old all the way up to 90 years old. So thank you so much to Joyce. I'm not sure if it was that relevant to finance, but it's nice to get a bit of a change there.
Well, Paula, you certainly brought imagination today, and thank you very much. What I thought was really interesting is that, you know, besides looking at the challenges of technology and the opportunities, I think your own story was really inspiring and interesting, because you were able to, at one level, put yourself in that particular position, but actually see there's a parallel issues in the present because of the way we are using technology without moving in and grabbing the capacity. Would that be true, that in a sense that fear, that shame that you talked about, that kind of nearly inability to do something and about decision making is exactly the same for people now, particularly young people coming through? Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think I totally agree. But we want them to ask questions more than ever, and we want them to critical think more than ever. So trying to create that environment where they feel safe to ask questions. You know,
but you've created that, and in a sense, And if you look at the future, which you know, one of your slides showed there, all the possibilities about education, how you dress, where you are, what humor you're in, how you're receptive to different ways of learning and teaching. How do we create that in such a centralized, and it's not just Ireland, it's centralized, you know, worldwide. So how is it by showing the power of Web3, what the possibilities are? Is that the great driver and changer of what's happening?
Yeah, I suppose really exposing not exposing, but explaining, you know, the historical narrative around, you know, Web 2 and the consequences of it and why we ended up there.
Yeah.
In terms of why, you know, our young people are worried and they're anxious, and why there's so much this poverty, and why are we there, and why was tech allowed to replicate that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but in a way, those questions, as you know, are very political. You know, this is kind of political stance. But I think you're offering, so there are, you know, politicians, various politicians would have different approaches to addressing that. And we hear that daily on the radio, if you like, because of homelessness, poverty, particularly child poverty and so on. But you're suggesting another way to address this is by embracing the power of this new internet, a decentralized internet. So how do we get that into the mindset and thinking, say, of policymakers, of educators? How do you think we can do that?
I think realistically, you need to demonstrate if it's cost effective or not, because we do live in worlds where, I mean, we have to show them a clear case study. This is how much money you can save. Yeah. This is, you know, it has to be an ROI, you know, coming from a political stance. But I think I encourage entrepreneurship and innovation, even in first years. I'm not training my students for corporations, I'll be honest. I'm training them to build social enterprises, to create their own jobs, create their own workforces, if that makes sense. So on a very, like, how will I say, micro level, nano level.
That's how you make the change, really.
I'm breeding.
So
Yeah.
in many ways, I think we can see your passion and dynamism there coming through very clearly. But in a way, you're kind of like it's part of a gentle revolution in that it is changing by degrees. It's other people giving them the power to change their lives. We hear about that a lot, through, I think, Web2 thinking. But this is actual enablement, empowerment through the way you're approaching your topic, which happens to be fashion, but you could do that with any topic effectively, but you're showing that power. Is that true? Isn't that what you're...
It is, and I use fashion and retail and supply chain as a way to explain examples more so than kind of, and I know your cohort, I'm sure they're mature students and so on, so it really depends who my audience is, what my examples are, and so on. But I was very fortunate at the weekend. I hosted the Metaverse Entertainment World Summit and Award, and I met a lovely lady from the UN, who's head of training and development for Web3. So we'll work together to figure out the Web3 in education and how it can help smaller communities. So that was a great content that I made. So maybe this is another way in which I can kind of start to explain. Exactly. But to be fair, Joyce, I have had students who say, I don't want to be unlearned. I don't care. I'm perfectly fine with people making decisions for me. I don't want to know.
And I think those two worlds can coexist then, a kind of centralized system and a decentralized system. If you've talked about Tume, making its own decisions, maybe even having its own currency or whatever. Could exist, next to, Ballina, which is completely different. I mean, there obviously has to be a common system, but you think local people, because you're advocating, it's communities defining this context, it's communities taking control. And, we've talked about this before, how in Japan, and I know you're going there, is it next week or a couple of weeks' time, that in Japan, the politicians are actually looking at creating regional DAOs so that the regions can grow more effectively. I mean, that's a nation taking that concept. So do you think it'll just exist in Tume, Tokyo, Japan? Is it going to be gradual like that different people will see that power and then start enabling the choice to be made by communities?
I don't see it in my lifetime. I don't see that kind of in my lifetime. No, not in terms of looking at smart cities and and governing your own community and generating an economy from it. I think that'll be long before I'll be dead. I think it's a conceptual stage. Sure, look, even when I lived in China for 7.5 years, they have a very unique political and economic situation. It works, it functions. Someone has to manage 1.4 billion people. I get it.
Yeah, but that's in fact the other. It's surveillance, as you know. It's control. It's very
so
controlled.
Whatever works for the economy. I mean, yes, surveillance capitalism. Yeah, in China. I mean, it really depends on. The question is, will the countries have their own governance and their own independence to run their own economies?
Yeah, separate to this world global entity. Yeah,
exactly. But I think it's trying to find the balance, because remember, like my student says, we don't want to live in a decentralized world. It makes us anxious. Okay, stay. So it depends on the industry. It depends on the culture of the country. This is what technology can enable us to explore these kind of systems, if that makes sense. But I really feel that a lot of people are sleeping, and even on a daily basis when I talk to people, I don't think they're very interested in, they're not fully functioning, contributing human beings. I find a lot of people that I meet are very passive and have no interest in their contribution to society. My parents, I'm fourth generation chemists and opticians, and I grew up on a farm. My first job was 6, putting the lids on my dad's medicine bottles. I always felt like my parents raised me to have a very good work ethic, and to remind me that I was a citizen and that I had a purpose and I had a contribution. I meet people that they have no contribution. They have no interest. They're distracted, I don't know, by something else. Or maybe I just live in this insular world where I spent too long in China and I don't know.
But maybe not. I think maybe, you know, that's the reality for some people's lives because they hadn't had that opportunity to see the possibilities, to feel that they as individuals are empowered. And I suppose what you've talked about over the last hour or so is actually getting people to think now maybe of these possibilities, to look at other ways of making decisions, using your skills, but using technology to create those possibilities.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
suppose.
why that's important, isn't it? That we all learn what
Yeah.
the possibilities are. We don't need to be computer scientists like
No,
yourself,
no,
but we can, if we do understand that there are changes, then that you know, in a way, you, as you said, you're lucky, but you have that really kind of ingrained sense of service to others, you know, and yet you're in many ways you're extremely liberated. So you're not kind of, this is what we all have to do. This has been your choice and this has been your background. So I think you've left us with a lot to think about. But I think absolutely more importantly, you've shown us the possibilities, left us with that thought.
Yes.
And I'm also, I have to say, I hadn't thought of this myself, but the idea of coming back in the metaverse when I'm gone, some people might think this is a nightmare. Other people might think this is really joy. So on that happy note, Paula, we'll say thank you very much. It was really, really inspiring.
And just
back, yeah.
And just Joyce, let you know, will I show them how to use Midjourney and WeChat?
Oh yes, if you could, that would be great. Yeah.
So guys, this is, you probably can see my screen. So this is Midjourney. So I use this. So Joyce, let's play a game. Do you want give me something? Let's create a photo together. Do you want to create some? Yeah. So let's see. Imagine /imagine. Okay. So. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to just put in a prompt and it's going to generate a picture. So, or we could do something what I do with my students, like Nike shoe with Messi footballer.
I mean, I was thinking, actually, I don't know whether this is too specific. As you know, I'm a Munster supporter and we're playing Leinster on Saturday. So could I think about, could I imagine Munster beating Leinster? Could we have some symbol of that?
I'm actually not sure. No, Munster, it's rugby, isn't it? God, I should
Munster
know.
rugby.
Rugby, okay. And hang on. Spell Munster. I mean, that's right.
M-U-N-S-T or yeah.
Yeah. And Leinster. Let's see.
I-N-S-T or yeah.
Playing. Let's just say playing a game.
Yeah.
Right, because it's a language.
Too specific, yeah. Playing a game.
Right, so now it's generating. But to be fair, and my first years we were having a giggle. The first time we started using Midjourney, I said, "Oh, you know, make a Midjourney picture of I don't know, Michael D. Higgins on a horse eating Oreo cookies," and that was really fun.
Yeah.
So guys, this is just it's just to generate. So we're going to see if your picture is coming up. So so here it's already. So this is generating.
It is generating those. That's interesting.
Yeah. So basically, I use this in college to create new images. So if the students want to create a retail pop-up store,
isn't that amazing? It is actually looking. It's been able to create those. But you know, just in terms of creating that your presentation today was created by you talking. You know, telling them your story, and they came up with those images.
They generated the images, yeah. So you can see here how people man on motorbike going down highway. You know, so you get the power of these tools, you know, for like my social media marketing students and so on.
Yes.
And then in terms of ChatGPT, I just want to show you here, you know, how I use Paula's Web3 keynote, for example. So again, you know, helping me script. You know, you can write me a 12-week program for fashion marketing for students with rubric, or you know, upload.
Just to stop there, you could say a course. I want to devise a course, a 12-week course on fashion, and you know,
I'm a fashion lecturer, so you have to train it. Just give it context. Write me a 12-week course on fashion buying make it sound, then sentiments analysis, make it sound fun. It sound fun, say. So we just go and see if it's right. So you see how it's generating.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So
people's concern, is that therefore there's either plagiarism, you're actually cutting out innovation and whatever. What would you say to that?
So we have set GPT-0. So I use this to detect for my students. So I use this to detect any content that's created by AI. So we have a plagiarism tool as well to detect.
Yeah. No, but what do you say to students? So it's not just creating that, isn't it? That's implement. Isn't that's something they can work on and develop and do other things with?
Yeah. So I suppose like a good example would be for the business model canvas, right? So I'd say, okay, guys, find me 2 companies that are completely unrelated and create a new product, for example. And then they go off and they use ChatGPT, and then I'd have a live kind of case study where they'd have to actually explain to me the information. So are you asking me how I'm using
but how they're using that to become more creative, develop their skills, their decision making?
So
isn't that what that's ChatGPT is doing, really?
Yeah, it's a tool. So my first year digital marketing, they'll be able to go to Thailand for the summer, sip pina coladas by the pool, use Midjourney to generate the press releases and all the social media content, and then use Midjourney to create the images that are attached to the social media content. So you've just automated 5 people's jobs in real time.
Yeah, but and that's what some people are concerned about. But in actual fact, it's showing, it's enabling, isn't humans, if you like, to add other things to that particular piece of work. So that's not going to annihilate job. It's just going to make them different and more maybe interactive than before.
Totally agreed. I mean, it's a tool. It's not a replacement.
It's a tool, yeah. And so I like the way you say that it is a tool and blockchain's a platform. So at all times, really, the person, the individual, is at the center of making those decisions and using it to empower themselves for whatever that is.
Totally agreed. Like, this is great for writer's block, or if you want to get ideas, so I use this even for my own, like even in terms of, coming up with sexy titles for, for presentations, or, when I was doing my keynote as well, I introduced myself. You can see all here on the left-hand side how I'm creating NFT opportunities and challenges. So it's just a tool, and it's not there to replace. I mean, the reason why I teach my students this is because they have writer's block. They are bored and they want to use new applications that
to stimulate their
exactly. And that's what ChatGPT and Midjourney does. It's getting to think and create, where you can focus on creativity rather than the mundane tasks of spell check and context. And so, I mean, even Joyce, like, I haven't taught it yet, but like if I wanted to summarize, let's say, an Excel sheet, I type into Midjourney or into ChatGPT and attach the Excel sheet, and it would summarize even books. Sometimes I don't have time to read books. Let's say summarize Joyce's whatever book into 10 pages.
Yeah.
Or it does it for you. So it's just an automation tool.
Yeah. So it's another age. It's another tool to help you both use your time, use your creativity more effectively.
Yeah,
I think it's fascinating. Yeah.
Kind of think of like Microsoft Office. But AI, and I know, and you don't have to use ChatGPT. I know, like, Microsoft Office now have an AI component embedded into Office. It's called Copilot. So next year, every platform that you're going to interact with moving forward will have an internal generated AI piece of technology, which will be either in a centralized kind of group or a decentralized group. But again, AI is very, you can use it in different platforms, there's different use cases. But in this sense, this is generative AI. This is using language models to create content. But again, who writes the content? Where does it go? Is it accurate or not? These are all the things that we're concerned about.
Yes, of course. And also, as you say, is that AI doesn't just generate it itself. It's based on that data that's fed into it, whether it's Web 2 or Web 3. And I think people are beginning to understand that. So Paula, that's super, and thank you very much again. I think, as I said, you definitely have food for thought, but more importantly, you'll get us looking at the future, perhaps in a slightly different way, and perhaps looking at ourselves to see how we can use this, Web3, this amazing opportunity with, although challenges, to change our own lives and those we're living with, but also, as you say, to contribute as well. So thanks again, Paula. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you later.
Thanks, Joyce.
Thanks again. God bless. Bye.